All right, thank you for tuning in. I could have used this book a week ago, Robin. 1 week ago, you were heading up to New Jersey with your mom.
Yes.
To see your first grandbaby.
Yes.
Now, why was I anxious? Why was I having anxious thoughts? Why was I having those worries just a week ago? See, when you're traveling, you don't worry about it. When somebody who cares about you is traveling, when somebody you care about is traveling, you are more anxious than when you yourself are traveling. I guess, I don't know. Although it's probably each. Anyway, so you were going up to the cold weather. I was worried about you slipping on the ice. I was worried about your mom, who's in her 80s. Don't tell her I said that. But anyway, so I know she's in good health, and then so I was worried, and you said, "Well, I'm still going anyway," and that was basically saying, "Would you just stop worrying?" So I needed the book, "Freedom from Anxious Thoughts and Feelings: A Two-Step Mindfulness Approach for Moving Beyond Fear and Worry." It is written by our guest, Dr. Scott Symington. Am I saying this right,
yes,
Robin? Symington. He is a clinical psychologist and expert in the treatment of anxiety disorders. And on Amazon, this is what it says. You ready? Mm-hmm. If you suffer from anxiety and experience racing, panicky thoughts, you need help right away. A week late, though. That's okay. I'll need it next week for some reason. Dr. Scott Symington, good morning, doctor. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Larry.
It's an honor to have you on the show. So are you like the shoe repairman who has worn shoes? Do you get anxious?
Have I experienced anxiety? Of course. Yeah. It's a universal phenomena.
Okay, so it's and see now. Okay, the fact that you said that makes me feel better. Just knowing that I'm not unusual.
Yeah, normalizing it, right? We tend to worry and get anxious because really what that is at the very core is something that we care about in life, something of value feels like it's at risk or under threat, and then we automatically have this fear response, and one of the manifestations of that is worrying, running it through our mind over and over again.
So when I have a dream that I would consider a nightmare, it makes me worry, and I don't know if the dream is caused from worry or, you know what I mean? I'll sit on the edge of the bed after having a nightmare and go, oh, please, don't let that one happen. Of course, when I dream about winning the lottery, then I say, oh, let that one happen.
Exactly. Yeah. If only we could choose the good ones, right?
Yeah. So, how does the book help me? What can you give me as a free sample right now?
Yeah. So what it does is it shows you what to do inside your head, the specific mental and emotional steps that diffuse, that make less powerful those problematic thoughts and feelings that we can experience, the worries and the anxious feelings that show up on the inside. It's a little bit of a missing link in our field, which is we have all these great theories and evidence-based strategies to cause anxiety go down or worry less, but you have to be able to apply them in the moment. They're only as good as their application. And so it's in the book, I offer a user-friendly way of knowing in the moment what to do with your attention, where to go with your mind, and even the attitude, your disposition towards that anxious feeling that shows up so that it'll have less power over you.
Is it a good thing to bury your fears, or should you embrace them and deal with them head on?
So what the research indicates is that the best way to relate to an anxious experience and worrisome thoughts is mindfulness principles. And it's kind of a confusing term, and it's used in a lot of different contexts. But in the field of psychology, what that means is that instead of fighting that challenging experience, that anxious feeling, you actually allow it to be there while at the same time not dwelling on it, leaning forward with your attention and being more in the present moment. And so the method that I developed, called the two-screen method, is a user-friendly way of applying what I just described, moving into acceptance and then finding a safe home for your attention. That is the recipe that causes anxiety to dissipate.
So if it happens at the same time in the same place regularly, it seems to me it would be kind of easier to get a handle on. For example, this is a long time ago. I've been driving a long time, but I remember when I was first learning to drive, My anxiety was getting up on the interstate. I always thought the interstate was the scariest road, you know? But then you do it all the time, and the next thing you know, that anxiety might still be there, but little by little it starts to go away. Is that part of what we're talking about?
Yeah, so you're referring to something very common, which is the threat center of our brain, which is always scanning for potential threats. It's prone to misfiring. It's prone to tagging something as a life-threatening threat to your person, and it's a little trigger happy because it would rather sound a false alarm rather than miss a genuine threat and then game over. So even there, some people, for example, are anxious driving on the freeway. Now, if they avoid freeways because it makes them anxious, they actually confirm that indeed that is a genuine threat to self, to the threat center, and then the next time they even think about getting on the freeway, they will start to feel anxious, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But you did the flip, Larry, which is instead of going into an avoidance pattern, which would confirm the threat and invite more anxiety into your life, you actually expose the threat center to the feared activity, and then it was perched on its seat saying, oh gosh, what's going to happen? Oh, I guess we're still alive. Maybe everything's okay. And then it learns. You can retrain that threat center. You almost need to lead it. You need to teach it, hey, don't be afraid of this. Okay, you can be afraid of this one. Yeah, the house being on fire, that's not a good thing. But driving on freeways, it may not be my preference, but it's not life-threatening.
The one thing I wanted to share with you was when I was younger, I used to play concerts. I was a guitar guy, and I went from college to college, and I would always have stage fright before I went up on stage. And then I heard an interview with a famous singer, and she said that she always gets so nervous that she throws up before she goes out. And I thought, wow, because I wasn't famous at all. I mean, I didn't have anything like she had. And I thought, okay, well, if she's getting nervous, then I guess it's just normal. And that actually helped me out. Just thinking that it was just like I said with anxiety, if it's just normal, I guess I'm okay.
It does help to know that you're not alone in some of these experiences. I also think it's helpful to have a healthy interpretation for these challenges. I mean, what you're describing going on stage, that's also living life fully. That is doing something that you love and a sign that you're not leading a boring life and that you're fully expressing your person. So it's interesting how some people can have the same kind of internal experience but interpret it differently. So for one person, before the big game, it's just butterflies and excitement. I can't wait to get out there. And then the next person is having a very similar psychological and physical experience, but there's a fear of, oh my gosh, what happens if I screw up? What happens if I don't deliver? And so it's also very helpful just to have a healthy interpretation for that natural fear that we all feel when we have a big performance.
How do you help the person that does not want to take control of their own life? They're constantly feeling sorry for themselves, they're ill, and they say, oh, woe is me, and then people band around them to help them, and then they don't want to help themselves. How do you get them out of that mode to help themselves and stop feeling sorry for themselves? That's a fear,
question.
Right?
Yeah, some people are attached in a way to their challenge. It almost, even though they're not necessarily happy with how they're feeling or this pattern that they're stuck in, it's what they know. It's grounding in a particular way, can even be tied into their identity. So in part, now this is moving in a slightly different direction. In therapy, we would address that core issue, which is, yes, I understand the distress that you're in, the pain that you're in, but let's also explore why you might be holding on to this issue, and first start there, because like with the model that I'm proposing, it assumes that you are wanting change in your life, not just speaking to that, but actually you're just longing for the information. Tell me what I can do so I can worry less. sleep better and feel less anxious, and there isn't that attachment. For a certain percentage of people, there is that clinging, that attachment, which then there's a first step before you can say, hey, and just do X, Y, and Z, and you'll feel better, because they're not quite ready yet.
So for the sake of definition, is worry and anxiety the same thing?
They're not. These terms are used interchangeably often in psychology: fear, worry, anxiety. For me, the way I use worry is a threatening thought, a concern that comes into awareness where you feel like something important to you is at risk. Now, that may or may not come with an anxious experience. Usually with anxiety, there's an implication of physiology, the physiology of fear, where there's some cortisol, adrenaline, maybe your heart rate is increased. But people can have worries that it's not a terribly anxious experience. So it really just depends on how you're defining it.
And so when people sometimes use alcohol or whatever, I mean, to remedy that, obviously that could have some consequences. But are any of those little gimmicky things that we do, we seem to do anyway, is there ever an okay time for that?
I mean, having a glass of wine or drink during a stressful period, is that the worst thing for a person? By the way, this is not the psychologist part of me speaking. I'm just speaking as a fellow human being. Do I see a problem with that personally? No, but as a long-term solution for treating anxiety, it's not effective because you get a rebound effect. So if you go home and have a big old glass of scotch or whatever it is, in the short term, it will depress your central nervous system. It'll turn down the volume on the anxiety, but then you're going to have a rebound effect later. It's going to ramp right back up, and then you're also dependent on these things in your life to manage your anxiety, and ultimately you want to take control of it.
So is there a logic behind it? And I just wanted to, in order for you to understand where the question is coming from, I have to tell you about a dog. And I know you're not a psychologist for dogs, but there was a dog that had one of those big cones on his neck, right? And it was my brother's dog. And I said, what's? Oh, he's anxious. He's biting his feet. I got to get... And so they actually cured the dog of anxiety, because that was the word he used, anxious, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the dog was worried, so this was clearly... And they could train the dog to not have the anxiety that was causing that, and then they could take that cone off, but it took a little time. So if you can train a dog, I guess you could train me, right?
There's hope for us. There's hope.
I don't know, maybe asking you about an animal is out of your realm, but is there a... Like, I would think with humans, it's going to be logical. You have to say, don't worry, everything's okay. But with a dog, you can't say that. There's something else they must do. I don't even know what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that the family member put a coat on it? Is that what you said?
Cone, C-O-N-E, like around the neck.
Oh, a cone.
Yeah.
A cone. Got you. Yeah, so with as far as we know, with the dog, right, they don't have the same kind of consciousness that we do, so they're not fueling anxiety the way we do by going away in our mind and running that concern through our mind over and over and over again. That's one of the ways that we feed or we fuel anxiety and worry, is with this incredible consciousness that we have. So the dog isn't really dealing with that. Some central nervous systems just rev higher than others, so that dog was probably naturally anxious, and then there's probably some association that dog had in its environment that was also triggering anxiety, so they had to do some behavioral modification essentially to disrupt that.
Well, whatever they do for the dog, since obviously logic doesn't play a role, I'm guessing anyway, I mean, does that apply to humans, whatever they did?
Yeah, because even our freeway example that we were talking about before, if theoretically, if a dog is getting triggered, is getting anxious around a certain stimuli, you can do gradual exposure. So and this works for both humans and animals. You can do gradual exposure to that thing in the environment that's triggering the anxiety and retrain the brain not to respond in the same way. So there's something about the cone, and I have no idea how to train dogs. Now you've got me interested in it. But before I know it, I'm going to be offering my clients cones.
How important is spirituality or belief in God, no matter what religion a person is? How important is that to alleviating your fears?
Well, it can be a huge resource for people, and I definitely leverage that resource when clients are in that space who come to see me, because really, if you want to handle worry and anxiety well, you have to be willing to suffer well. See, you can't control the anxiety from showing up or the worry coming into your mind. That is involuntary. The question is, how are you going to respond to that challenge? It's never easy to feel anxious, even when you roll out an evidence-based strategy and mindfulness principles and you do exactly what I'm describing. It's still a form of suffering, but it's healthy suffering, and it's also what puts you on the track towards ultimate freedom. But in those critical spaces, when you have faith or a spiritual resource, it can help you do the healthy, hard thing. It can help you move into, let's say, spiritual surrender or a kind of letting go because you trust in something beyond self. So it can be a valuable resource for people.
The person who picks up the book, if they see it in the bookstore, for example, must obviously be going through something that they identify as anxiety. I'm wondering if depression falls into that category.
Yes. So in the book, I actually have 3 what I call side screens. So there's a front screen and a side screen. The front screen is more the present moment, the life-giving, positive thoughts, feelings, images, and then off to the right there's a side screen. That's where the threats, fears, worries, depressing images and feelings, all of the potentially destructive thoughts and feelings that show up that can take us away from what's really important and spoil our day. So in the book, the side screens come in 3 different flavors, and I have a chapter on each. There's the anxious side screen, there's an addictive side screen, and then there's a depressive side screen. And the way you relate to each of these side screens, there's universal principles with each 3, but each side screen also has its unique challenges. And so in terms of the depressive side screen, it can show up all on its own, meaning you can be walking through the day and then start having these thoughts about being a failure and there's not much to look forward to in life, and why is everybody else living a full life while you're home alone, or whatever it might be, that if you hang out on that depressive side screen, it will feed a depressive mood and change the way that you are thinking about self, your life, and the future. But depression can also be secondary to anxiety, because anxiety, when people are wrestling with this on a daily basis, it's really the experience of being embattled. You're just being beaten up internally every day. And so if somebody were beating me up every day, I would start feeling depressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
And so you often see, or I see clients coming in reporting depressive symptoms, that as we dig deeper, it's actually anxiety, and we're needing to address the anxiety, and the depression is secondary.
Talk about, Robin sort of hinted on this, but then I wanted to go back to it. If I pick up the book because I feel anxious or depressed, that's one thing. But if I pick up the book because I think Robin feels that way, and I'm going to try to be the amateur psychologist because I've read your book, give me some advice. How can I do that? How can I help somebody else with the book?
Well, it might be a good idea for you to read it first, and then say, I found this book to be very helpful. You might too. I think you might want to own it for yourself first. And really, I do, and I'm not saying this just because I wrote the book. Of course, I want people to get the book, but just being unfiltered with you, at the very core, it shows you what to do to de-energize problematic thoughts and feelings.
Really?
It's something that we all need help with. Nobody has ever taught us, hey, when you have a problematic thought or feeling show up inside you, you just do this inside your internal world. Nobody's ever shown us that, and really, so even if you're not a worrier, you could benefit from just understanding how to see what's happening in your internal world and the mental, emotional, and behavioral steps that can diffuse the challenging thoughts and feelings that show up inside us.
So I don't want to imply that anxiety is contagious, but I was in a restaurant one time, and nice place, nice food, the waitress, everybody was nice, but across was a table with two ladies. And all I could hear was them complaining about this, complaining about that. And I'm thinking, oh, boy, this is ruining my whole experience here. Mm-hmm. So where was I being infected, for lack of a better word, by their were they somehow anxious, or were they going through something that was affecting me?
Yeah, there's emotional contagion, especially if you're an empathic person. You're just going to feel more in your environment, which means you have to be even more skilled at how you relate to the things that you feel that come into your internal world. So it's actually a positive thing. Empathy is a good characteristic. It just requires the person to be more on top of how they manage that input, because you are going to feel your environment more. Because maybe Bob in the next table next to you, he could care less. Like it didn't even register for him. Right. There's no emotional contagion.
In the very beginning of your public speaking career, did you feel that anxiety for speaking in front of people?
Oh yeah, I had a big event last Tuesday night, and I got all revved up, and I'm like, oh gosh, I have to practice what I preach here. Okay, what do I tell people? And that's, but I also, as long as I'm prepared, as long as I've done what I think is good preparation, what really helps me, besides just the basic breathing and good self-care, is putting a frame on it, like a healthy frame. Like, this is the experience of going for it in life. This is me getting up in front of people and talking about the things that motivate me, my passions, and so I frame it in a way so that the hard feeling almost falls in a more positive category, if that makes sense.
Doctor, thank you for being on the air with us today. The book, again, is called Freedom from Anxious Thoughts and Feelings. I found it on Amazon, where it's getting 5-star reviews, by the way. Do you have a website you want to direct us to, of your own?
Yes, drsymington.com, and my last name is Symington, drsymington.com.
All right, very good. I'm calming down already, Robin. I'm just
good.
Feeling a lot better. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. A lot of fun chatting with you all.
You too. We'll be right back.